So here we are.
Yeah.
We got everything set up. This is our very first podcast. Feeling really excited about it. Going to explore some very interesting topics in an in-depth way through thought and intellectual thought.
New territory for me, but I'm excited.
Yeah. Pretty new for me as well. Done some simple stuff, but this is a little more advanced. Looking forward to it. I think we've got a nice setup. I think we're going to be able to bring people through our thoughts in a way that's going to make them think.
There's so much going on out in the world right now that I need to talk it out anyway.
Right. I think you're right. I think as a whole, we all kind of need to allow ourselves to kind of dive in a little deeper and see what's going on. And I think as a society, using these kind of conversations are going to be helpful. So.
I love coffee.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with coffee. I'm a drink it black kind of man.
I wonder if there's some podcasts where they have whiskey and Coke in here instead of coffee.
Probably. I know Rogan likes to get people high and drunk and all.
I kind of like that in a way, though, you know?
Yeah, I think it just helps people to kind of relax. And get casual and you're less hesitant, you know what I mean, and what you say. You're not thinking as much and things kind of are just free flowing.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, we should probably move into our topic for today.
We are going with...
Yeah, so we're going to start out pretty kind of on a... so the idea is to start out on the story of Job.
Okay.
Now, those people who don't understand, first off, this isn't going to be a Christian or, any type of podcast like that, although we do happen to be Christian. But the point with this story is to kind of mix spirituality with our reality in a way where you can kind of look at the dynamic between the relationship of God and Satan and how we can sort of conceptualize ourselves here, down here on Earth in our little scale of the universe and reality that we can see, but then try to kind of relate it as well to more of a higher version that perhaps God might look down on us and see, and what that might mean for our reality.
I like it.
Yeah. So when we first conceptualized this podcast, we were actually on a long drive, which actually I think happens kind of a lot. You got two people on a long drive. And the idea was looking at the story of Job. Job is a man on earth, and God speaks to the devil about Job and says, have you considered Job? Job is a very godly man. He lives his life in the way that he thought God would see fit.
Yeah, it's almost like Job was the most faithful man.
I would say so.
Very successful. He had thousands of camels, right?
Yeah. Camels.
He was wealthy. He had 6, 7 children.
Right. And servants and things like that. He had multiple livestock and potentially multiple businesses as well. So but the way this started was to try to understand the dynamic of God and the devil and their relationship. Because when God says, hey, look, have you considered Job, who's living a great life? You know what I mean? He's on top of the world, essentially, with everything he has. And the devil comes back at God and says, well, of course he praises you. Look at his life, So at that point, and this kind of gets into the relationship dynamic, God says, well, if you think it's because of that, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but feel free to go down there and take things from him. Okay? Meaning his children, his houses, his servants, his livestock, all of that stuff. But he does say, but don't touch Job himself.
Yeah.
All right. And then there's
That's
multiple
true. I remember
levels.
that.
Yeah. There's multiple levels. And then he says, okay,
Really intense concept to basically unleashing the devil upon, that's of all the stories in the Bible, it's one of the more interesting ones for sure.
yeah, because it shows an interesting dynamic in the relationship between the two as well, outside of Job.
like God and the devil are having a conversation.
Right.
It's almost like they're having a couple of beers and they're about to hedge some bets.
Right. Exactly. Which kind of brought me to the concept of, okay, let's try to bring that down so that we can understand it in a basic way, right? How they look at us, a way that we could kind of visualize something like that is if you picture a terrarium, which a terrarium is a completely enclosed ecosystem and environment, right? So let's say you have some soil, some water, crops, some nutrients, and then you enclose all of that in glass, and literally air can't even move in and out. Okay, that's what a terrarium is. Or you could look at it as like kind of like a biosphere, sort of as well. Basically, an enclosed ecosystem. So that made me think of some different things of, okay, so you have God and the devil, and they're having this dynamic relationship where it's like, oh, well, you don't believe me? Go test it out. Go see for yourself. It's not just, you're the devil, I'm above you. That's it. You know what I mean? He actually engages. So it kind of made me think, well, that's a wild concept. And with the idea of the terrarium in mind, what if there's, and the scale of the universe, I mean, you can consistently zoom in and there's more and more going on, and you can actually zoom out as well. And there's more and more going on with the different galaxies and solar systems. And it's almost like it's infinite zoom in, infinite zoom out, sort of. It made me think, what if we are just a toy on a different scale for somebody like that, where they can raise up an entire world and civilization and
experiment on
tweak with it. Yeah, experiment and just do these different kind of things.
Yeah, I had kind of a similar thought, like they're having this conversation, which is rare in the Bible like that. And it's this triangle, it's the devil and God, and they're both going to focus on Job. And it's almost like what I thought is they're having a conversation about calibrating the consciousness of humans. And they decided to pick one and really kind of like test the human condition, right? And it's a point in history where it's fascinating. And they really, God in a way threw Job under the bus. Wow, if you read the what happened to him, it is, they just destroyed that poor feller.
Right. Yeah. They took all of his livestock, almost all of his servants. I think almost all of his children ended up dying. Any houses, barns, things like that, all got torn down. Then he himself in the end was left with, sores and boils, and started to curse his own birth.
He did. He didn't yell at God. He just kind of complained.
Yeah.
I think at that point he said, am I not righteous? Or, it was like, am I not doing everything as I should? But he, for the most part, he stayed faithful.
Yeah. I think he did.
Yeah.
I don't think he actually ever cursed God anywhere through it, which was, I think, God's point to prove to the devil.
Oh, and the other interesting thing that happened, which I had never had, I really haven't read the Bible that much or much as I should, but it was interesting. There was a passage where God comes as a whirlwind image, a whirlwind, storm, whatever, and he speaks directly to Job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he kind of challenges Job and says some very interesting things where God really he kind of is a boss there for a second and says, "Who are you to question? I have made the stars. I've made Earth. Right? I can get into the mind of a lion who's hungry." And there's these passages. Actually, a couple of them are real interesting. We should bring one of them up that I
Okay.
found.
Let's do it.
Yeah. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare me." See, I don't really like what I brought up there.
But I think it does speak to your point. Words without knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, here you are saying these things, but you have no actual true knowledge of what's actually going on.
Yes.
Right.
There was a passage where he said, I guess in astrological history, the Orion star cluster, astrology, it changed during Earth's early years because the Bible's based in history and they watched the stars.
Right.
And he says something like, "Can you change the belts and unband the stars of Orion?" And that was an interesting thing because God was saying directly to him, "You have no understanding. I control the stars."
Right.
Right. And it really humbled, and you really get a grasp of you don't see many times where God is like just telling somebody the reality of life.
Right.
Even though Job was really going through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because really the way it's laid out is, so as a relatively, what I consider myself to be, whether or not I actually am, I consider myself to be a pretty logical thinker, and I'd like to understand the physics behind things and that. But in this case, God doesn't give any of that. All he really says is, I have the ability to control your entire world in any way that I want.
Mm-hmm.
So don't question me. But I like to take it to the thought of, so this is kind of where I wanted to get into the podcast, where it's like, so assuming that is true, that God is real and he views us in that kind of lens, it's almost like us looking at like a little hamster civilization, sort of, where we control everything in their life, right? We could essentially, as far as they're concerned, move mountains, we could move stars, we could destroy the whole thing, we could bless them with food and nutrients. We essentially have complete control of their world, right? And now that's kind of how I wanted to start to talk about, so then what exactly is our world? How we see it? What is actually going on? There are things out there to the top level of, let's say, God, where he can move the stars. But then there's also things kind of closer to Earth, or our perspective, where people can manipulate us with information over the airways, things like that.
There's free will. Free will's a big thing, and I think a lot of that was tested in this passage or this story of Job. And it is like it's a zoo and they're watching. And the other thing that I came across going through this feeling is that that positive and negative, that yin and the yang in the Eastern philosophies, and God and the devil. There's always this underlying, everything in life is energy, right? It just seems to be this constant thing. And that's definitely a big player in the story of this, is that,
right,
here's a man who climbed to the top and was faithful, and it was almost too easy for him. You know, I think that's part of the reason they picked Job. And I think it resonates too, because living, whether you're a lion or whether you're a hamster, life is going to be rough. It's going to be full of oscillations and ups and downs. You know, it's going to be tough. It's going to bring you to your proverbial knees.
Right.
And I don't know of any being out there that exists that's been created or that doesn't go through that oscillation of ups and downs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the thing you brought up about energy too, the different energies that exist out there and how energy can flow. And it kind of brings me to a thought, like, so again, bringing it back down to our perspective, the only way we could really, if we had an entire universe, you know, it would have to be a digital thing running on a computer. It would be a simulation, right? And if we wanted to understand what one being within that simulation was thinking, we would have to pull them up, right? Click, clack. Here's Job. Let me put him under
a microscope almost.
Right. And we could do that with anybody at any time, you know? So it really starts to push me into a direction of simulation theory, where could we actually be living in a simulation? Is there any evidence for that? And exploring that as well. So one of the parts for that is one thing I've noticed that goes with biological beings, right? Meaning humans as well as trees. And then it even goes onto rivers. And then if you zoom out on the world, well, let me say what I mean exactly. So the vein structure within our bodies comes from an artery, right? And then it peels off and goes into a smaller vein than the artery, but still relatively large, into a different direction to where it needs to feed blood. And then from that branch, it goes out in smaller branches and spreads out even more to touch the little tips that it needs to touch. Okay. So if you visualize that, you'll also see that in a tree with no leaves, right? Has a very similar structure. So
a tree of life-ish.
Yeah, kind of. You'll see that exact same structure in those trees with no leaves. And then if you actually look at rivers from the top down, when they start to spread out, you see that same structure. And another really cool thing, so when you zoom out on our universe, so first you're on Earth, you zoom out to our galaxy, okay? And then you zoom out again, and what you get is called galaxy clusters, right? And then you zoom out again, and you get clusters of galaxy clusters, okay? Now, and when you do that, you start to see that same sort of structure, the vein structure, the tree structure, the river structure, right? And it just kind of makes me wonder what exactly is going on here, because it's got to be some sort of an energy flow that's a natural way to get out. But when you zoom out that far and you see galaxy clusters of galaxy clusters emitting that same sort of shape, there's just I don't know how to process that.
There's a common, we'll just say a law, right, that governs the universe from A to Z, right? Because you keep seeing these same patterns like you're talking about.
Right.
Over and over again. You know, I would even take it farther and say beyond rivers and trees and beyond zooming out into galaxies, where it starts to look like these three-dimensional trees, like you're saying, where the neurons of the brain, you know, and even roots of trees, or cilia growth and mushroom, you know, cilia growth. And,
right.
Yeah. What does that mean? To me, it means that everything's ruled by well, they say mathematics, right? You know, it's
Right.
like the Fibonacci.
Mhm.
You know, the what is it? The odd numbers, the 1, the 3, and the 5
Yeah, prime numbers.
prime numbers.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's all, you know.
That's an interesting concept. I wonder
But
if Fibonacci fits into that.
so when you get into mathematics, which that's a mathematical concept that's obviously
All throughout nature.
throughout everything that ever was created after the Big Bang, or you know, whatever you want to say to that, then it starts to look like code, right? Some of these quantum physicists and stuff is like when they really start, if you start doing the math and really looking at things and doing the computations, some of them are saying that it does, they see these ones and zeros that start to look like computer code,
Yeah.
you know, and that's when the whole simulation thing kind of started, when these high level mathematicians were basically saying, this looks like computer code.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Mhm.
But can mathematics in some sort of structured fashion, can it, and physics, can it not look like computer code? Or does it always have to end up looking like some sort of computer code, right? Because it's structure.
And it has to be structured.
Right.
I think so. I think it's, you know, maybe there is, the term I would use is anomalies, but my common sense, any anomalies outside of this universal law of prime numbers, we'll just say, or doesn't last long, maybe, right? It's a perversion, it dies off, it fails, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we know it, life as we know it, is a product of the code being properly executed.
Right.
Anything else to a T, yeah.
Yeah. Like the syntax in the code is always perfect. There's
over large expanses of time, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there really difference? You know, a lot of people get kind of like, an atheist would say, see, we are living in a simulation. Everything looks like code. There is no God.
Right.
But I don't believe that's mutually exclusive. Like, if you're experiencing life and you're experiencing consciousness and love and anger and hate and jealousy of all those things, that's pretty much, that's life. How it was created, what does it matter? I mean, that's...
Yeah, to say because, and there is some evidence I do want to go over, at least discuss, for people who just don't know about it. That's really interesting. That kind of clues us in. Perhaps we are truly in a simulation. But yeah, but who's to say? So perhaps we view the creator of the simulation as that is God, right? God, it talks about in the Bible, he created the earth and the heavens and everything in existence, right? If you were the creator of a simulation, that would be you, right? At least from our level of thinking, that's where it's at. So I think it's really interesting. But one of the things I did want to talk about too, and we'll bring it up here in a second, is the double slit theory.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know this, or maybe you just don't play video games, or you never have, I'm sure you've seen one. It's important to understand this concept, that when you're playing a video game with what you have in view, even though you have a whole massive world around you, what is in your view is the only thing that's currently loaded into that video game, right? If you're playing on a computer with a small amount of RAM or resources and you turn quickly, you'll see things pop in and render, right? And the interesting thing with the double slit experiment that they've done is basically they're sending photons through slits, okay? And they have, so there's a broad piece of media with 2 slits in it, and then they're firing photons through that. And as you do that, you would imagine you'd get a cluster of random hits on the media behind it, okay? But, and this is when... actually, let's just bring it up right now.
You should, yeah. If we got video of that, it's like, I'm trying to wrap my mind around what you're saying, but I've seen it once before, a while back, and that was a big moment. I don't know when they did that double slit experiment. I don't think it was that long ago. Yeah. And it was basically photons. They wanted to observe photons, right? And
Right.
it's kind of, meaning of life consciousness studies, stuff like perception.
Uh-huh.
Because that's a big thing. You put some thought into this, I noticed, because like that video game, right? Our perception is only what we look at. You can't see behind your head.
Right.
Perception is it's almost like, don't animals, their perception is completely different than ours. Like,
Right.
there are animals that can kind of almost see behind their head, maybe, or
Yeah. Well,
it depends on the interface. So like
prey animals have their eyes.
our interface is we can only see so many degrees. What is it? 180 degrees. And it's what we look at.
Mm-hmm.
And those fields of vision get filled when you turn your head and everything changes.
Right. Exactly. So here's the double slit experiment. Okay. So here's a couple of photos that you can see. And the idea is your light source is here. Okay. And you have your metal sheet with the 2 slits in it here. And then it fires through that onto this media, which records where it hits. Okay. Now here's the crazy thing about that. They're using wavelength here. You can see these are waves. Okay. And what happens is when there's no camera observing this, right? This is just happening and all you're looking at is the result, which is in the media. You get this pattern right here, which is kind of like waves hitting waves, right? And then the result, like, so think of ripples in a lake happening, and then you have a perfectly still lake and you throw a rock into it, and then you get ripples out, and now you throw another rock into it, and those ripples hit each other, okay? They're waves, and they'll hit in that pattern.
That's the double slit.
That's the double slit. Here's the kicker, okay? When you actually put a camera in on this, you get a completely different result, okay? This one you can see there's an actual camera over here looking at it. When you do that, it's no longer a wave pattern. It is a single a single photon firing through and hitting the media, and it develops clusters in almost a random sort of shape, okay? When there's a camera, only when it's observed.
When it's observed, right? That's the term they use,
Yes.
observed.
And then it's like physical. But when it's not observed, it's like light waves, just waves.
That's a big deal. That's like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
We still can't figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can really explain it yet. Nobody's
I think we got to be able to dive a little bit more into quantum physics.
Under observation. And then when you don't observe, it doesn't do that. When it's not observed, when there's not a camera on it.
You get a completely different
It's
result.
like consciousness it's the most bizarre concept I've ever heard, actually, honestly.
It's insane. Like it would seem insane to us unless we consider the fact that someone's trying to save resources on a certain level, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, somebody's trying to save resources on a certain level. So instead of instead of actually rendering in, they keep it a wavelength.
It's waiting till you turn your head, right?
Right. You got to see it. And until you do, that's
a thing. That's the other, I think what you're getting at is, besides the code, the mathematic codes that you keep seeing in nature, that's like a real experimental example of why people think we might be in a simulation.
Right. And people call it, I think it's like the holographic universe theory. You know, everything is wavelength until it's, and then you also get Schrodinger, I think it's Schrodinger's dead cat in a box. It's alive and dead both at the same time, but only when you open it do you get an actual result.
Seems similar, yeah.
Yeah. So it's some interesting things to think about, and that the fact that we've evolved enough in our technology to be able to kind of cue in on some things that may potentially lead, you know, at least show evidence for that perhaps we are in some sort of digital simulation.
Does it matter what the answer is?
Only to the curious mind.
All years of science, years of quantum physics, you know, and all these calculations, you know, you've seen them in college chalkboards where these guys write out these equations, and it's just like, and all that stuff was really just chasing your tail, possibly, right? All this gravity. That's what I struggle with, is like, so much of the gravity seems legit. I mean, how time, space, reality, but it all may just be an illusion.
Right. It could potentially be a grand illusion. But when you ask, what is that? So all these things that we do, and potentially working out all these different theories and mathematical equations and chasing your tail. The thing is when you look at it from where we stand, right? Because where we stand is we're in the middle of things. We're not up above looking down. We don't have the ability to change reality, right? We're in it. We can't, we can't really change it, at least not yet. But so I think we're not technically necessarily chasing our tail, because we don't even, if we are in a simulation, we don't even know what the purpose of the simulation is, right? It could be that we're beings, and we're sort of like avatar, like you're an avatar of your consciousness sitting there in this simulation, and I'm the same, right? But we don't understand what the purpose of this is. Another way to look at it is, okay, let's say we're able to develop these kind of things, and we have Neuralink in our head, okay, that can directly integrate with our brain. And let's say we got a 5-minute break at work, and so we're 100 years in the future, let's say, okay? We got a 5-minute break for whatever we're doing, and we're like, oh, you know what? I want to go live the life of a farmer back in this time, from when he was born to 85 when he dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could do that in 5 minutes in base reality, but within the simulation that runs through the, let's say, Neuralink, the integration to your brain, the time isn't the same, right? So that could also be something that we're in. Perhaps we're in an actual video game right now, just on a grander scale.
If you're in a game, there's a clock, there's something running, there's a sync, right? Any program that's running this, there's a clock.
It's a timeline.
Like, we are definitely on the clock. We have a limited lifespan. Like, typically what the average lifespan is right now is like, 80 years old or whatever. But if we go back to the Bible, apparently in the Old Testament, there was people that lived to 200, 300 years old, even older, right?
Right.
So that's interesting. That's almost like a computer interface, like,
dial up the...
Right. And, Old Testament is history. There's legit history in the Old Testament.
Right.
You can say a lot of things about the Bible and stuff, but there is some actual history there. So why are they saying that beings or humans were living that many years? I mean, it's just like, why make that stuff up?
Yeah. There was something I heard. I'd have to do some research on it, but I did hear something about different conditions on Earth that would make it so that people would live a lot longer.
I saw an interesting thing on this subject about lifespan.
Yeah.
Where they figured out, there's a study they did on mice, and it goes back to kind of a code thing again. All the cells, the regenerative cells, what the reason that we start getting older is because the biological, it's like DNA message for cells to like replicate, because cells are always there's communication lost.
Right.
It's the message that starts to lose, and that's the reason why you start to age.
Like that. There's like I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So when a cell replicates to another cell, basically what happens is, like you were saying, there's a substance in there that's holding this information, and you can actually, so I actually take a supplement called I think it's called True Niagen. Okay, but basically what it does is it increases the NAD in your cells, which is that portion that transfers the message. So the more NAD, the less degradation you get when it replicates, essentially making it so that you can live longer. right? That's why we get wrinkles in our skin, you know, and stuff like that. When
You've been taking this stuff and you haven't told me about this stuff. You just let me get old and you just take.
look, I'm not saying it's going to keep me young forever, and I've only been doing it for like a month.
Oh yeah.
But it's worth looking into. It's worth looking into.
Well, they say the thing I saw that they're on the edge of like being able to like plateau or like make it so you don't get older.
Yeah.
Skin. They said like the one I saw, the guy's like skin, we can regenerate skin easy. I thought it was a pretty cocky statement.
Sure, it certainly seems so.
Yeah.
Because when has that ever happened, and can you prove it? Because I've never seen.
He seemed pretty. The dude I saw, he was pretty confident.
Oh, was it David something?
I don't know the names.
Okay.
It was just like fleeting. I saw the other day, but there was actually a couple of them I seen, and they seemed pretty confident. You know, because they did it in mice.
Yeah.
They did it.
Yeah.
You know.
There's a guy, I can't remember his name. If I think about it, I'll make it available. But who does a whole podcast on this stuff? He's been on Joe Rogan, and he did he did like a 6-part podcast where each one was like an hour or so long, all about his science and because he's a scientist and his research, and he's been taking this NAD+ supplement, right? Because through his research, he's got a ton of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he mixes it in with his yogurt every morning and has been doing so for a long time. And if you look at him, he's like 50 something years old, 50, mid 50s, early 50s, but he doesn't really look it. He's got 0 gray hair. He doesn't really have hardly any wrinkles. It's something to look into, you know, because we only get, you know, at our level of your general citizen in society, we don't get a whole lot of information.
No,
you know
that's
what I
right.
mean? So
isn't that kind of, even if we're in a simulation or we're in a computer program, or even if we're in some sort of alchemy creation, isn't that kind of hacking things? It seems like there's a possible negative consequence of that, because you're kind of like hacking. I think the way things are supposed to be or designed to be, it's a little scary to me. There's something unsettling about that to me.
yeah, I could understand that. I would just say you are kind of hacking biology at that point.
I guess the whole medical field's based on that, right? So
essentially,
maybe I'm overthinking it.
Could be because, and you know, somebody gets sick and then they cure it because they have a drug for that now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wouldn't necessarily. I see what you're saying. What I would consider to be more hacking is if we, as a human race, could start to interact with the universe based on this double slit theory, and having it all be wavelength, but then program it for how we want it to work.
Yeah, that's at they're saying, I've seen that's too, where we're not tapping into our power because we can literally manifest stuff. We can like the Matrix. Isn't that kind of
like Neo in the Matrix?
Neo in the Matrix. That's why, you know.
Yeah, that could be. Oh, you know, that's an interesting theory too. If you think about like all of the different archaeological sites with these massive stone walls where all the stones fit perfectly together still after thousands of years, and how they actually did that and built it, and you know, because we can't do that today. Moving those rocks with the technology that they had back then are seemingly impossible, especially the distances that they moved. If they had figured out a way to hack in to that level where it is wavelength, like imagine you're moving a rock, but it's just a wavelength of a rock. It's not an actual rock, right? And then you get it into place, shaped, and then boom, you turn it into solid, actual rock. That's what I would consider to be hacking this universe.
To me, that's like a divine power. That's a godly type power.
Yes. I don't agree, because there's another, go ahead.
I mean, the mechanics of that, like humans on Earth, is anybody close to this? Is anybody, you know, like, is it meditation? I mean, like, it can't be the mindset that I'm in right now, because I'm inundated with a job and I got to make money and I got, you know, 2 divorces, you know, life keeps coming at you. I don't have time. I mean, it's overwhelming to think that you could find this trick to do that. I mean, how that?
Yeah, I don't know. It may be that like if you figure out the trick, right, that there's almost like strings you can kind of tug on where you don't have complete control, but you can sort of influence outcomes more.
So I think of Star Wars. Like, you didn't see anything, right? Like
Right.
when they use the Force,
Yeah.
another science fiction where it's like
Yeah.
kind of like that.
It's yeah.
Levitate things.
Yeah. Levitate things, stuff like that. I'm thinking more of it on a like tugging on the strings of the fabric of reality, though.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Where you're getting close to that almost divine power, not mind control, but literally affecting, let's call it the simulation around you, where you kind of affect that slightly.
Maybe the way that we're either created or programmed, we're not capable of that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Maybe it's something that like it's beyond us.
Or at least there's some sort of dials that need to be turned up, which you can, maybe you can do yourself, or
like maybe you can level up,
turn it up, right? Level it up,
right?
Somehow.
Yeah, that may be. You never know. Yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Like the Buddhists that go into this state of nirvana, right? You heard about that. Maybe that's where you could start. But they're just, they're living in an alternate realm, They're living in, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing.
So once you use your brain to go to a different frequency, like a DMT trip, ayahuasca, and then time isn't a thing anymore. Like you were talking about earlier, how, you could, in the future, you could disconnect from your job and go take a 15-minute break and experience this immersive alternate experience. And in 15 minutes, you could go experience a lifetime as a farmer, or maybe you want to be a rock star in the 1970s, or something. And time is irrelevant.
Yeah,
but you can't operate in those realms or with those magic capabilities with awake consciousness, right? It has to be like REM sleep, or something similar to that, right?
There's actually, so when you were talking about Buddhist monks and things, because some of the things, it's like, wouldn't you say, okay, I live in a state of nirvana, or I can do this, or I can do that, but it can't be measured or proven? I'm kind of just being the kind of guy, I'm going to be like, yeah, right, man, like prove it if it's true. But one thing they can do, from what I've seen, is they can take a wet sheet in a cold environment, put it on themselves, meditate, and dry that sheet quickly. Yeah, by heating up their body, using body heat, like simple stuff like that. Things you could explain with physics, or biology.
What's the one with the fire where these monks, like, they light them on fire and stuff, and they like...
The only thing I know about that is one guy who lit himself on fire.
There was only one guy that could do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it wasn't like he could do that. Anybody can pour gasoline on themselves and light a match.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he did. But from what I understand, he did it and didn't move, didn't scream.
Yeah.
Stayed in his shape, of like sitting.
He could maybe control his magnetic field a little bit, right? And he could create just a little gap of his aura was magnetically charged, and the fire looked like it was all over him, but it really wasn't touching.
Well, he burned and died.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he died.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah.
So
it's a wild way to protest, that's for sure.
Yeah. And he just like sat there. I remember seeing videos. He just,
yeah.
Weird.
It is and you also got to wonder, okay, but is there some sort of mental illness involved in that, where you light yourself on fire and kill yourself and protest for some of that? To me, that's like beyond extreme.
It is. That's very extreme and kind of dark.
Yeah.
And actually, like, if you look at Buddhist monks and stuff, it doesn't seem like they're very happy people, but then you see there's, I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, I've never really.
Every religion has a point where they just take it too far.
That's the truth.
Christianity, Buddhism, all of them.
Yeah.
Just Islam. There's always it's taken too far.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when, because a lot of times you'll see religions and they're set up well, you know, everything behind them. Then you got this man comes into that religion and throws his own stuff into it. And of course, if religion and the spirituality and stuff is divine and man comes into it and tries to tweak it, it just throws it completely off. You know, all of a sudden it goes off its rails and all these terrible unintended consequences come in because we're trying to put ourselves as some sort of control within that, you know. It's just,
you know, as we move our discussion to talk about different religions and everything, and that's why I had this thought about the story of Job, about them staring into the aquarium, so to speak, and calibrating, you know, free will and human nature together, God and the devil.
Yeah.
You know, like,
wow, that's an interesting concept.
yeah, see what I'm saying? That's one that came to me, is that they're engaged, the God and the devil are engaged in this conversation about calibrating the human condition, and it's this moment, like Job is the one that was picked to put under the microscope and see if they've got it calibrated correctly.
Yeah. Like,
and the devil's like, I don't think so.
Did we get this one?
We're going to find out right now. I'll find out if we got this thing calibrated correctly.
Right.
Like they're collaborating. Like God and the devil are collaborating.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That is an interesting thought.
Yeah.
That it goes pretty deep, man. I like that.
And that's where I ended up at the end of that whole story of Job. And if you pull it out to a modern day, you know, because the Old Testament was a long damn time ago.
Right.
That's where my mind went to.
Yeah. Let's test our creation.
It really seems like that collaborative moment.
You know, it's an interesting thing too, because when they talk about the devil in the book of Job, I'm not sure that it's actually the devil, because when you look into it, God refers to as the thing he's talking to that we see as the devil as adversity.
Yeah.
You know,
I know that. I mean,
so if God's blessing Job and he's got all these blessings and then adversity comes in, you know, guess what? Everything isn't always going to be perfect. How is he going to handle it? Boy, that's even interesting.
Even again, going back to, you know, Lucifer, you're right. You're like, the devil is not necessarily always this horned red beast, right? That's a concept that, you know, if you really start to study religions and specifically Christianity, it starts to get a little murky.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, because when he's talking to it, God asks him, what have you been doing? You know what I mean? And he refers to him as adversity. And he's like, well, I'm going back and forth beyond around the earth, on the earth. You know, almost like that's his job, is to go and create adversity. And then, oh man, I had something I really wanted to say and I kind of lost it there.
You know, and calibrating, like, and having this experiment and Christianity, you know, this most modern Western religion, which acknowledges that the human condition and that we are born to sin, right? So we have the devil in us and we have God in us, and it's colliding, right? Again, energy, positive, negative.
Right.
And so that concept that Christianity brings, and other religions do too, you know, you see that over and over again. And somehow walking the line of the human condition. But I think, isn't this theory that God is love, and I guess what you're kind of saying is the devil is an adversity, and then how do you know, and then God's bet is, of course, that love conquers all. And the adversity bet is the devil's bailiwick, we'll call it. And then the standing overall bet is, especially now, it's very relevant because we're on the cusp of World War III. We, as a civilization, we're finding out that we've been lied to a lot, and there's this excessive greed, and how much money is enough for some of these people, and all, COVID, and
Power to
power.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. The other thing is the devil is the devil because he rebelled against God.
Yeah. Lucifer was cast down to the earthly realms.
Yeah.
So the devil's here on earth.
And he brought a third of the angels with him, didn't he? 2/3 stayed up there. Boy, there's just some interesting stuff to really get into.
Yeah.
Because now there's not just the devil and God, but there's all these angels, and the devil's
there's actually actors on planet Earth that yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So where do we go from here?
Maybe take a break.
Yeah, we can take a break. Let's do that. I kind of got to take a piss anyways. So.
I do too.
Okay, and we're back. And we had some interesting conversation.
That was good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, during the break.
Yeah.
Let's bring some of that into here.
The more we go down this level, it kind of depresses me, but I'm starting to think, like, if I had to hedge my bets, I feel like we're in a simulation.
It does certainly seem like a simulation.
It depresses me a little bit. It's like hard. I don't know. I struggle with it.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, addressing that, I do want to mention the simulation seems true from physical, right? So if you look at the double slit experiment and run that, how we run simulations, how it's not actually there unless it's observed by a person. So for example, if you're stepping your foot on the ground isn't actually there and solid until you are there to measure it with your body, meaning you step on it and it's solid kind of thing. Just an interesting concept. But then also from the spiritual realm as well, if you think about it from any of your traditional religions, where the way that we're put here on earth and we were known before, and then we're put here, it all kind of ties in together with a simulation or with a real reality that was created by somebody else, which is how we would view a simulation if we were in it. Now, to get back to the depressing part of it, I gotta tell you, I don't find it depressing at all. I find it like crazy exciting. I find it crazy exciting.
I guess I could see that side.
Yeah, because all it really means, if that's true, in that let's say that we do exist outside.
There's more stories. There's more possibilities. There's
right.
More, right.
We don't actually really even know yet what is going on, which to me is really exciting because there's all this unknown potential going on outside of the simulation. Like, so when we were out there speaking, when we took a quick break, you mentioned we could be in a starship and we could be traveling for maybe 100 years to get somewhere else, but to keep us sane, we all plugged into this simulation while we're in our homeostasis pods or whatever.
Yep.
Yep. And here we are. We could be a gigantic civilization moving forward to a completely different realm. That it's that kind of potential that is super exciting.
Instead of watching the latest Netflix series,
boom,
you go to this immersive, what seems reality, life for a while you're traveling to Andromeda 27.
Right. Yeah. That kind of potential, man.
So these aliens, that flying saucers, if they're real, like, those could be us.
Those could be us. They could also be part of the simulation.
They could be part of the simulation.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? The other, I forgot what it was. There was another interesting part as well. At least that I found interesting. Oh, right. So that maybe out, going on the same kind of footing as we're in a spaceship in homeostasis pods, but we link into the simulation to pass the time. Maybe also we're beings on another planet or in another realm of existence outside of the simulation, let's say, where they put us into this simulation because we could have potentially done something wrong. And they're like, hey, you need to learn this lesson because you can't act like that in this society. So we're going to put you into the simulation that feels like it's 80 years long to make you perhaps more sensitive or more understanding of something where we weren't before. Like perhaps they could use something like this to treat psychopaths.
A lot of people say,
or something like that.
Spiritual beings that we, as a spiritual being, which we all maybe are, we either elected to come here and learn a lesson, or we were sent here to learn a lesson.
Okay, think about this. Let's say you're a being on a different plane of simulation or true reality. Let's call it base reality.
I was just going to say there's a term. It's base reality.
Yeah, let's say we're not in base reality now. We're in a simulation now. But we exist in base reality as well, right? And we're just put into this. What if it's a form of, let's say, I am a murderer in base reality. Okay. So I did something terrible in base reality and killed somebody. And when I did it, I didn't have any empathy at all. Okay. Let's say now a judge from base reality says, hey, you're going into a simulation now where people that you love are going to be murdered because you don't understand what it is you actually did.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So that's now deep as hell, bro.
Right. So now we're put into this simulation. I'm put in this simulation where I maybe have a family and children and I love them, and then somebody comes and takes them away, and I can't understand. In base reality, I can't understand the pain they went through. But by putting me into the simulation, I can now completely empathize and fully understand what I did and how wrong it truly was. Kind of thing.
It kind of ties into the story of Job again, which was our theme, because see, I'm getting at there.
Well, go man.
Like one of the things in there was Job has 3 of his friends when he's, when he's in, his family's died and he's lost everything. His friends come and basically they judge him. They say, you're going through this because you did something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big concept. It's a big concept in the story of Job.
Okay.
The 3 friends that visit and what happens is, which is terrible. Can you imagine? Your friends come there and Job never really did anything wrong.
Yeah.
And he's got his friends, so-called friends, saying, you must have done something wrong, bro.
Yeah. So not only did you lose everything, your friends are coming at you after you lost everything.
And this ends up being his saving grace. It's interesting because what Job, he has a moment where he got really internally very angry at his friends, but he decided to forgive them because they just don't know. Job, and when God realizes that he has forgiven his friends, it's not judging him, but they were just ignorant, maybe, right?
Yeah.
God is like, Job, you did it. And of course, that's when everything turns around for him. That moment, And what brought me to that is you talking about, that, in this base reality. And that's interesting that you said, because, people go through, they have these lives where it's like, how much bad can happen to this person, right? People have really kind of, for the most part, great lives. And then there's the whole spectrum. And there seems to be certain people that just go through just this. And kind of what you're saying is maybe that's what behind it is, in the base reality, they did something bad.
Yeah. That could be. And it could be, that's an interesting concept too, because then when you have people who have, let's say what we would call from our perspective, better lives, maybe they did something, but it just wasn't as severe, right? So their adversity that they feel like going through this is a little less. Whereas somebody who maybe did something absolutely terrible, their adversity is a whole lot more, right? And then one thing I want to say on this is that if we're correct in this line of thinking, this is a learning experience. Okay. So it doesn't make you a terrible person. You're not what you did in the past, right? Especially because you can still learn from it in the future and become something different, right? It's like a piece that maybe was missing and a little block that was missing, and it's pushed in there and filled in, you know?
It also makes me think about karma, right? As a universal law, like we were talking about laws and codes and karma. Like you can't escape it. Not even if you're in a different reality. Guess what? Your next reality.
Right. Yeah. Almost like karma is, yeah, good point.
See?
Yeah. Because even if you think you've escaped it in this reality.
Now I'll take it even farther. That's why you start to get with these infinite realities and parallel realities, because it takes so long. If you were really like, if we're all really powerful spiritual beings, it could take millions and millions of years and lifetimes for us to fully ascend and figure it all out. And again, you would oscillate through this and hopefully climb.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. I like this discussion.
This is
getting places.
Deep.
Yeah. Things I never thought about.
You know,
before.
The parallel lives, butterfly effect, that's another big thing. Deja vu. I saw something where when you experience deja vu, what they say is that's when this kind of like momentary glitch of when your parallel life kind of like had a moment where it divided and changed. You ever hear that?
Oh, I understand.
Philip K. Dick, who is the author, he's a science fiction author who's fascinating. Sometime we should almost do just a show on him. He wrote Blade Runner, which is, really relevant science fiction. If you look where we're at today, Blade Runner's, wow, with artificial intelligence and robots, and it was another interesting thing about Philip K. Dick is he's a lot of science fiction writers, they're using their imagination, but Philip says he had visions. He had like prophetic visions and then wrote his books.
Okay.
It's fascinating, right?
That is fascinating. Kind of an anecdotal experience one time in my life, when I was much younger, my late teenage years, I was at a party and I had a dream. Okay. And then later on in life, that exact moment from that exact same dream played out in reality. And I remember it freaked me out so much. I left. I was like, this is crazy. This freaks me out. At the at the time and understanding where I was like, this is a sign for something. What does this mean?
That would be a lot.
Yeah. And I just remember, okay, I'm just gonna leave right now after seeing that, because the exact same person at the exact same table in the exact same room did the exact same thing that had happened in my dream. Or maybe it was a touch of deja vu.
Or your dream was prophetic vision.
Yeah, like let's say you can have a dream or you can have visions.
Well, what you're describing sounds like you had, like I've had similar things, but they're only like, it's like 3 seconds or something. This sounds like, what if I heard you correctly, like it was like more like you were in an episode, right? It was lasted for 5 minutes or something.
No, it was quick.
It was quick?
It was quick. Yep. And I watched it all go down and I was like, I dreamt that exact same moment before.
That's weird.
And it freaked me out enough that I was like, I'm out of here. I just left, man. I went home. It just scared the crap out of me, because that shouldn't happen. It's an interesting anecdotal thing.
Yeah. Because deja vu, everybody has them. I've been here before. That whole thing is, this is in the French language has a word for that, but nobody else seems to.
Yeah.
Everybody calls it deja vu. Unless I haven't looked into this that much, but maybe in other societies they do have a name for it.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes the French have life figured out pretty good, I think.
Perhaps they do.
They do have, their language is pretty incredible. And they're
Well, if you ask a French person, it's the best language ever.
they're emotionally and artistically connected to the world, and their language, for some reason,
Yeah.
rises a little above other languages in that
Good.
respect.
Good. That is an interesting concept. Different languages can actually potentially give you an actual different outlook on the world just because you grew up speaking a different
Now I want to know what deja vu is like. What is that translation? And there is,
I don't know specifically. I know what it means, but I don't know the word for word.
we need a language expert.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we wrap this guy up?
Yeah, I was looking through my notes here. Kind of all I had. It's like these where we could be beings in other base realities. And I think of Friedrich Nietzsche, the psychologist from the early 19th century or whatever, like amor fati, this concept that I read about, where everything that happens in your life that's negative is teaching you a lesson because it's going to get you through something that happens in your life later.
Right. Yeah.
And then how 100 years ago this guy was kind of like conceptualizing this, I do not know. It's amazing to me. But he kind of saw exactly what we were talking about this possibility of multiple life experiences and parallel lives and ascension.
Yeah.
And lessons.
Right. Yeah. One thing I've definitely noticed is any hard times you go through, although they seem tough and you don't want to do them at the time, it truly is a benefit to your life in the future.
And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly.
It's a cheesy saying, but it's a real common theme in life.
Yeah. I mean, it's a saying for a reason, right?
And plus, you never appreciate, you don't even know what happiness is unless you've been miserable.
Yeah. Exactly. Good.
Again, positive, negative, yin and yang.
Yeah.
It's just the way.
Calibration.
The calibrations.
Yeah.
Oh, and on the calibrations, by the way, with this artificial intelligence stuff, it's just now we are essentially creating sort of a being, right? And they have this box, this box with all these they'll have like Ethernet network cables going into this processor, and it's got a bunch of dials and switches and stuff, and they can calibrate, the personality of the artificial intelligence, and it's like. This is the first thing where us humans, or at least us really brilliant humans, are creating a being.
Yeah, that's true.
And we talked about Job and calibrating and dials and all this stuff, and ego and humility, and
yeah, we actually might be on the verge, like you said, creating a being. But if you take it further, imagine you have 1 billion different AIs with different temperaments, and you throw them all into one simulation and you figure out which ones maybe is the best from that simulation for whatever you need it to be suited for.
Yeah. We're living in really interesting times.
Yeah, man. Yep.
I just want to get to the end. The impatient me wants to get to the end, and I want to know everything. And I think that's human nature. We want to know. We want all the answers.
Right.
But we just can't have all the answers.
Yeah.
We're not capable of having all the answers. And maybe the people that do all of a sudden get the people that are like Ted Kaczynski's of the world, and the people that really are crazy, and maybe they have somehow received the answers and they're breaking down psychologically on planet Earth because.
Real quick, who's Ted?
The Unabomber.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a lot of talk about MK Ultra and him, and I think there's actually some record that goes back.
Yeah. So can you imagine though, if suddenly you got all the answers of life, you cognitively understood them, you might be a mess here.
Yeah.
It's like
Perhaps,
people that die and have these afterlife experiences, and then they get pulled back down to earth, right? It's not your time yet. they struggle because they experience that a universal joy and like being free of the body and pain and all those emotions when you're and
Yeah, and I remember on that concept, I remember a friend of mine, I don't know if it's true, should have done some research, but do you remember who the creator or inventor of peanut butter was? It
no,
was a black man. Boy, I can't recall what his name is either. But point being, apparently, and again, I haven't done any research, I don't know. Somebody just told me this, but along that same line of concept that you were saying, when you're all this knowledge is crammed into you, kind of, so to speak. Apparently, he was studying the Bible and kind of speak with the higher being, how you would consider you when you're speaking with God or I'm speaking with God in our own little place. Asked God if he could know the secrets of the universe. And God told him, I can't tell you the secrets of the universe because you wouldn't be able to handle it. Essentially, you wouldn't be able to bring it all in and process it. It would destroy you, so to speak. And then what he said supposedly was, well, can you tell me the secrets of the peanut? Can you tell me all there is to know about the peanut?
really?
Yeah.
And then he made peanut butter.
And then he made peanut butter.
You are shitting me.
No, well, hey, like I said, this is a story that somebody told me that I thought was really interesting. And
I'm just hearing this now because I really like that.
Yeah, I wish I could remember his name, but if you look up the inventor of peanut butter, you could probably do some research and find out if a story like that, it has any truth to it. But and there was peanut oil, and all kinds of stuff that comes from the peanut. But again, it just kind of played into where, no, you can't know everything.
That guy was brilliant, right? Because he was like, how about this question? A lot of people would have just been like, okay, God, I understand. I can't.
Right. You're right.
That guy was a hustler.
It's like, all right, if I can't know the universe, what about this?
I love that story.
Yeah, it was a good story.
I love that story. Yeah. I don't know. I think we kind of covered that for now.
I think you're right. I think we did a good job there with all kinds of.
That was our first podcast here.
Yeah.
I mean,
but in the end, the way I see it, I believe we are in, whether it's digital or whatever it's actually made of, in some sort of simulation where we're meant to learn something. And not only from a physical plane, meaning the double slit experiment, where it's got to be observed in order to be measured, but also from a spiritual perspective. Both of them align to me.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really, what does it matter? The experience is the experience.
Yeah.
Pain is pain.
It is.
Love is love.
Yeah.
Joy is joy.
Right. And here we are.
Here we are.
Regardless of anything else.
Good luck.
Yeah.
That's why I like to be humble myself.
It's a good way to be.
It is a good way to be.
Yeah.
And be grateful.
Yeah.
If possible.
Yeah. All right, man. Wrap it up.
It's a wrap.
All right. Good show.
Yep.